I swear that I will never go near railway tracks again, although I am sure that it is my destiny to die under the wheels of a train. I feel like it's going to happen one way or another. The recent meeting with the switchman was not the first and is unlikely to be the last. He must have taken a fancy to my annoying face. This story began at a young age. Back then, I lived in a small town with a population of 17,000 people, where almost everyone you meet is your friend. We had 3 schools, and I was lucky to study at the first gymnasium. She was considered the best. I admit, studying wasn't easy, but I tried to be diligent. I had a classmate named Jelia at school, a pretty girl with bright red hair and eyes of a rare amber hue. I liked her, but not in a romantic way. It seemed to me that falling in love with a classmate was the same as falling in love with my own sister. We'd been together since first grade. I remembered her as a little toothless girl who on the 1st of September, her parents tied such big bows that it seemed she was about to fly away with the wind to a magical land. Helium and I were like relatives. Our friendship seemed to be something obligatory by default. It just happened that way. We used to quarrel, and then, after a while, we reconciled again. It's hard to study in the same class and hold grudges for a long time, because something funny happens all the time. You can't get angry and laugh at the same time. Sometimes we'd hang out on the streets after school. We could go to the cinema or to the park, and then I would accompany her to the bus because she lived in a village a few kilometers from our city. One day, we went out with her, and the time flew by unnoticed. The last transport is gone. "Damn it," said Jella, looking at her watch. "It's already 5:30 a.m. How could I have missed the bus? Do you have money for a taxi? Can I add a little?" I suggested, feeling guilty. "No need, I'll walk. It takes about 40 minutes to walk here, no more," Jelia replied, as if he didn't feel any danger. "Are you going to walk alone through the wastelands?" "Yeah." Gela went home in the evening, and no one saw her anymore. "Come along, show me your village," I suggested, thinking it would be an interesting adventure. "And then, you're going back alone?" "Well, as you wish, you imposed yourself." Jelia was delighted, and we set off. First, we went down a steep hill on dry grass. Then we walked through wild places where tall trees grew, and they found themselves on a dusty road that stretched next to a field where sunflowers were ripening. "Don't you want some sunflower seeds?" A friend suggested it. "How can you touch them?" I asked doubtfully. "You're not going to fill a bag. No one gets poorer from one," said the girl, and plucked the drooping head of the nearest plant. The sun was still high. We walked, chatted, and husked the seeds. They were completely different from the ones in the store. The shells are soft, and the kernels are raw and tasteless. But for some reason, I liked it. This whole sudden trip seemed like an interesting gamble. I was wondering if I would be able to get back to the city before dark, so that my parents wouldn't sound the alarm about my disappearance. I would have picked up my pace, but the small granite stones cut into the thin soles of my sneakers. We didn't see anyone the whole way through this desolate region. We went out to the railway tracks and walked straight ahead. There are about 20 minutes left, and then the village begins, Jelia said cheerfully, adjusting her backpack. Ahead loomed a small tunnel under the bridge. There were beer bottles and other trash lying around. The concrete walls were covered with graffiti, and the rails disappeared into the darkness. "Let's run through it?" a friend suggested. Her eyes glittered with either mischief or fear. We rushed to the distillery and quickly found ourselves on the other side. The tunnel was only 10 meters long. Are you afraid of the dark? I asked when we slowed down. No, Geller replied. It's just dangerous here. In this place, people often get run over by trains. My neighbor's aunt died here recently. You go back, be careful, okay? You can hear the train from a kilometer away, but I have no hearing problems, I assured him, not imagining how careless you have to be to get under the wheels of a train. Yes, there's nowhere to hide in the tunnel. It's quite narrow, but why go there if you hear a rumble and feel the rails shaking? The main thing is that you don't get the switchmen here, Gelia said somehow frivolously. Should I be afraid of switchmen? I asked, imagining some kind of evil man in a blue sweatshirt and an orange vest. And isn't this an outdated profession? Automation should already be installed on all railways. It's hard to imagine that some people are still walking around and pulling levers on the rails. No, I'm talking about another switchman, but you don't know. There's a scary story about this tunnel, Gelia said, as if waiting to be asked to tell it. I, like many boys, loved creepy legends, and a story with a link to a place is gold. Of course, I wanted to hear it. We continued walking, and I looked back at the dark tunnel opening. Many people died under its arches. They couldn't help but invent a sinister story about such a place. A switchman is such a person, cut into two. Gelia lowered her voice, heightening the atmosphere. Do his legs run separately or something? I tried to imagine and raised one eyebrow. No, it is divided not along, but across. There is a slit between the right and left halves, as if a train had passed through it. The girl ran her finger from her forehead to her chin. Don't show it to yourself, I said with a touch of irony, since I wasn't superstitious. So, what about this switchman? The girl shrugged her shoulders. They say that they lure people onto the tracks when there is a train or something like that. I asked, turning around once more. Well, just because he's angry, I guess, Gelia said. Does he have any background and motivation? I've been trying to find out the details. Who is he, and where did he come from? For what is he taking revenge on people? No, my friend replied. He's just a scary person. The ghost of the railroad. Maybe he was a switchman, and he was run over by a train. Boring, I said, disappointed. Then come up with a backstory for him yourself, Gelia suggested. Well, let's say he's undead. I began to fantasize. There's a goblin in the forest, a waterman in the lake, and a switchman on the railroad. And he, like the other undead, needs sacrifices. Alien blood and creepy rumors prolong his existence. He needs to be believed in, otherwise he will disappear. The tunnel is his temple of sacrifice. Your composing call. Interestingly, said the friend and smiled. You should write horror stories. Do you believe in a switchman? I asked sarcastically. No, of course not. But if I go through a tunnel, I always remember it, replied Gelia. It's probably something superstitious, like a black cat running across the road. We found ourselves on a long rural street. On both sides there were cute houses with bright front gardens, painted in different colors. Somewhere on the plots, dogs were barking. Somewhere curious cats were sitting at the ban gates, and old ladies were resting on the benches. Gelia greeted everyone she met and explained to me that it was customary in the village, otherwise they would consider you impolite. I also started saying, "Good evening" to everyone for the company. We reached her house. It turned out that my friend lives well. Her apartment was spacious. It's not like my closet-sized room. In general, There were many people in the village who had large houses. That's probably why people choose rural life. You can build housing of any size, but in the city, such an apartment will cost a fortune. Jelly's mom invited me to come in for tea, but I declined, saying it was time to go home. I didn't want to walk back alone in the dark. The sun was already sinking to the tops of the trees, and the first chill was freezing my fingers and ears. I said goodbye to Jelly and went back, trying to remember all the turns. The way back didn't seem that long. Before I knew it, I was back at the railroad. The grass rustled around them. Even a light breeze made you shiver with chills. There's a tunnel ahead. I didn't even remember the story about the switchman anymore. It seemed that it was much more dangerous to meet some muddy guys there. Beer bottles didn't come out of thin air there. But it was quiet in the shadows under the bridge. I was happily lighting up the sleepers and suddenly froze at the exit, noticing someone. It became clear to me at first glance that this was not an ordinary person. He was too tall, about 3 meters tall. Its outline was obscured by darkness, but the straight cut from the top of the head to the crotch immediately caught the eye. The wound on his body stood out in a straight black line. I was petrified with fear and stopped, realizing that this was the switchman in front of me. He stood between the rails, long and thin, like a pole sticking out of the ground. And suddenly the giant's body opened like a book. It slowly split in half, right along that creepy line earlier. I saw his insides, the left and right hemispheres of the brain, the beating heart, the swollen lungs, the pulsating intestines. All his organs were intact, as if this cut had only grazed the top layer of flesh. The giant held out his arms to me. They were long and thin, like the rails themselves. He opened his palms, but did not try to touch me. The giant stretched out his arms to me. They were long and thin, like the rails themselves. He opened his hands, but he didn't try to touch me, but seemed to be calling me into his arms. I tried to take a deep breath. He wanted to force himself out of his stupor. And then the sleepers trembled under his feet. The noise was growing behind me. It was a train. He was getting closer, but I couldn't run towards the giant. Jumping against the wall is also a bad idea. The tunnel is too narrow. It can hit the train or it can pull it under the wheels. All that remained was to run back towards the hum of the approaching train. The locomotive was rushing towards the tunnel. It seemed like he was growing in size by the second, turning into a huge iron monster. His deafening horn hit me like a gust of wind. I'll never forget the moment when I almost lost my life for the first time. The heat from the train, the blinding light, the smell of tar and engine oil. That could have been my death. I managed to jump out of the tunnel a moment before the iron train crashed into it. I rolled down the rocks into the thorny undergrowth, and he lifted his arms, his face, hurt his knee, and tore his school jacket. But he stayed alive. I was lucky. The train sped off into the distance, leaving behind a hum and a trembling air. The driver probably didn't even realize that he had almost hit someone. I got out of the thorns, feeling the scratches itch all over my body, and looked up at the railroad. The forked giant was still there. He was looking out of the tunnel. His huge silhouette loomed against the background of the lilac sky. His eyes were narrowed like two black holes. The switchman tried to kill me by shocking me with his sudden appearance. The train was his tool. He was like a giant hammer, demolishing everyone he could catch off guard. I could have been gone. All that would be left of me would be wet pieces smeared on the rails. And now, the giant was looking down, regretting that he hadn't gotten a new soul at his disposal. I went around through the thorn bushes, trying to get out of this damn place as soon as possible and be at home. Gelia must have sensed my detachment as soon as she saw me at school, but she didn't pester me with questions. She waited for the break and offered to go out into the fresh air. When we were in the yard, my friend took a plastic container out of her backpack. Mom made it for us. I told you to buy me a drink for seeing me off yesterday. She took off the lid. Inside were sandwiches with ham, tomatoes, and lettuce leaves. Thanks, I said, taking one, even if there was no appetite at all. How did you get there? Are you lost? Asked Gelia, taking a bite of her sandwich. Jella, I said, you don't go through that tunnel anymore. I almost got run over by a train yesterday. Hearing this, the girl choked and coughed slightly. You're a fool, but he said there were no problems with hearing. I patted her on the back and she continued her snack, stuffing half of the sandwich into her mouth at once. That's not the point. There was a switchman there. He almost got me killed. Promise me you won't go through that tunnel again. I tried to speak convincingly so that she would take my words seriously. Jill stopped chewing and looked at me with her cheeks full. What? The switchman? That ghost from the horror story, you mean? She didn't believe me, even though she told me that creepy story herself. Yes, that's the one. I nodded. And what was he like? Asked Jella. 3 meters tall, split in two, and absolutely creepy, I replied. Much scarier than you told me. He's not a ghost, but some kind of soul collector. Dima, you have a lump on your forehead. You hit your head. What if you have a concussion? Gelia became worried, pushing aside a lock of my face's hair. I don't have any concussion. I got angry and jumped up from the bench. Listen to what they tell you. Don't ever go through that tunnel again. Can you promise me that or not? The girl raised her head and looked up at me. Okay, don't get mad. I understand you. I promise. I've already intimidated you like a child. We never return to this topic again. Gelia did not ask unnecessary questions, realizing that this event had left a heavy mark on my soul, and I wanted to forget about him as soon as possible. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I have been disturbed more than once by rumors about dead people on railway tracks. The case was especially loud when the train took down several young guys at once. That incident was cynically called a meat fountain. It happened the following year, still in the same place. Someone saw the train dive into the tunnel and leave already covered in blood, scattering arms, legs, and heads in all directions. None of those guys even had time to scream. We found a place to hang out. Fools don't survive. It's natural selection, some of those who heard about it said. I think people were trying to protect themselves from the tragedy with their cruelty. As if you're full of worries, you can anticipate everything in the world. They would probably say that about me too. I got hit by a train. I'm a fool. I had similar nightmares with different but hopeless endings. I found myself in a dark tunnel again. I even smelled oil, rust, and dust. It was narrower, but longer than in reality. I walked through it, and each time I came across a giant that was cut open, blocking the exit. Immediately, a train was honking ferociously behind them. I ran back, tripping over the sleepers. In one version of the dream, I didn't have a second to jump outside. The frenzied train smashed my body like a water balloon, and I woke up in an icy sweat, shuddering. In another nightmare, I managed to run out into the light, but the switchman's long arm grabbed my leg and dragged me back into the tunnel. And again, the train crushed me with its wheels, broke me into pieces, and tore off my head. 15 years have passed since then. 15 years. The years flew by unnoticed, And now I'm no longer a schoolboy or even a student, but a man over 30 with a beard and a mortgage. I can't believe this happened to me. But you have to be grateful. Life could have ended a long time ago. Now, I was living in another city. I haven't talked to Jelia since high school graduation, although it once seemed like our friendship was forever. It's just that the paths have parted, and no one remembers anyone. A typical adult life story. Strange dreams haunted me until the end of 11th grade. It was only when I left to go to college that they miraculously stopped. I don't know if it was the change of scenery, the new life, or maybe I just got away from the switchman. Although I remember when I visited my parents in my hometown for the summer holidays, there were flashes of old nightmares. It must have been hard for me to come back to those memories. That's why I chose to stay in my new place and try to move on, as if it had never happened, as if I were returning to that terrible day. It felt like the first time, like it was happening right now. I may have remembered that incident as something unreal, but I have always been wary of railways. The image of the dissected giant seemed like a nightmarish vision years later. The switchman. He couldn't really exist, could he? I would like to refer to the emotional shock of being almost hit by a train, or the injury from a fall. But I remembered for sure that first I saw a skinny, tall figure, and only then I was fleeing from a diesel locomotive. Although you can't rely on memory, they say this thing is unstable. And years later, we can remember events that never even happened. I didn't know if I should believe my own head, but my body was definitely turning to stone. As soon as I got close to the railroad track, I could feel the cold that I felt that evening. The cold from the weather, from the wind rushing at me with a multi-ton iron from the switch, which forced me to stand still and then escape. It's been so many years, and I still haven't gone near the railways, just in case. There was still fear in my heart, and he looked like a 3-meter tall man with a deep wound all along his body. It was as if he was always there, like a shadow that lurked in the depths of memories, only to reappear one day, after meeting with friends. Taxi prices have skyrocketed recently, and I decided to save money and take a walk at the same time. It's useful, after all. October was unusually warm and dry. I like to walk in the evening, breathe in the fresh air, smell the scents of fallen leaves, and look at the rare, half-hidden stars. Memories of the previous evening flashed through his mind. We had a good time with the guys. I was lucky to meet boring people like me, those who love board games and don't whine about getting bored. Our meetings sometimes went the same way, and no one complained. A quiet suburb. It's dark all around. The lights of the center are ahead. I had never walked there before, and did not know that the railway crosses the path from the forest park. It would seem, so what? I took 2 steps, and that was it. But the sight of the rolled-up rails immediately triggered a phobia in me. My chest felt hot, my breathing quickened, and my pulse jumped out of control. I wanted to get through quickly, but I noticed in the dark that the rubber plates were stacked unevenly on the tracks. There was a gap between them, into which my foot sank to the ankle. I jerked violently and realized that I was stuck, as if in a trap. There was a black void in the gap between the rubber plates. I couldn't even see my shoe, and the darkness seemed to swallow up my foot. Even before I heard the soft rumble, a fire of fear broke out in me in the distance. I screamed with all my might, jerking my leg and ignoring the pain. Help me, help me. But no one heard me, just like I didn't hear other people's voices. The night, the forest park, the quiet rustle of fallen leaves, which is driven away by the wind. I'm alone. Few people walked in that place, especially at night. And then, somewhere in the darkness, a train began to hum. I realized that an unstoppable death machine was coming at me, and if I don't do something, I'm finished. They can't even assemble the whole body. My mother will bury a closed coffin, in which I will be mixed with rubble and fuel oil. I screamed, tearing my throat, bursting into tears of fear and despair. The foot couldn't be pulled out without getting rid of the shoe. I'm specifically stuck. I pulled it over and over, tearing the skin and feeling the growing pain, but it didn't work. The train was making a turn in the distance. Her yellow windows flashed in the dark. The train was inevitably moving in my direction. I was living my last minute. I was just walking home, but suddenly I got stuck, and now I had to die, screaming in terror. The iron hammer was coming at me again to smash my body into pieces. It was happening all over again, and I, peeling the skin to the meat, rushed once more. The foot popped out of the gap with a crunch. I fell on my back and backed away like a crab. The next moment, the lights of an electric train flashed by. Streams of air hit my face. A flickering light shone into his eyes. The train flew over the rails and disappeared somewhere into the darkness, and I remained sitting on the ground, feeling completely drained. His heart was pounding in his chest, as if repeating the beating of iron wheels. Finally catching my breath, I stood up and felt that my leg was throbbing with acute pain. It looks like a dislocation, but I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, even dragging her along the ground. And as I was leaving, I saw him. He stood in the distance on the tracks, shrouded in a misty haze. A 3-meter-tall man followed me with a displeased look. He had been waiting for this moment for so many years. He was waiting for me to make a mistake and approach the road. I wanted to finish the job and failed again. I've already won this battle twice. A battle for his own life. But I know he's coming for me again. He needs my soul, but I need it more.